One of the things that's so confusing to me is that they didn't even like Pac. So for them to do, a documentary or everything, that's strictly business.
Yeah, he was scared. Yes, I agree. I do agree that he was probably terrified for his life. So if that is the case, it's also quite feasible that he put up money to get Pac killed.
The story blasts open again, and this time, it's more explosive than ever. Late in 2025, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis finally lands in custody, staring down a first-degree fatal charge tied to the 1996 shooting of Tupac Shakur. But here's the twist. Insiders say Keefe D didn't stay quiet. He's reportedly talking to the FBI, dropping details that could flip the entire narrative of one of music's darkest mysteries. This isn't just talk. This is the same Keefe D who already handed over his own words in a 2008 LAPD interview and later doubled down in his 2019 memoir, Compton Street Legend. Now, people close to the case claim he's gone even deeper, naming new power players who were supposedly part of the command chain behind that 1996 Las Vegas ambush. And then comes the bombshell, the name that's got every corner of the industry buzzing and justice insiders whispering nonstop: Snoop Dogg. Once seen as the unshakable symbol of West Coast culture, he's now being whispered about as possibly tied in ways nobody saw coming. That single revelation alone would have sent shockwaves through hip-hop circles across the globe. But what makes it all feel even wilder is the weight of time. Decades of silence, unanswered questions, half-forgotten interviews, and cryptic public comments. It's like something buried deep in the game's history is finally clawing its way out into the light. You can feel the heat building fast, messages spreading like wildfire, and every camp rushing to lock in their version of the truth. We can track exactly when Keefe D's own words cracked open a case that had been frozen for nearly 30 years, and it all started with him talking too much. From the very night Tupac was shot on September 7th, 1996 in Las Vegas, cops already had Keefe D on their radar as a prime suspect, but somehow no one ever got charged. Not until September 29th, 2023. That's when Vegas authorities finally hit him with charges after digging back through the things he himself had said in interviews and media appearances. Lieutenant Jason Johansson broke it down clearly. It was Keefe D's own mouth that reignited the whole case. His interviews, his memoir, and even what he said on BET's Death Row Chronicles back in 2018 all played a part. In that documentary, he straight up admitted he was in the Cadillac that rolled up beside Tupac and Suge Knight's BMW right before the shots went off. Now, Keefe D never claimed he pulled the trigger. He pinned that on his nephew, Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, but he still put himself right at the heart of the plot. That single detail flipped the whole story on its head, turning what once felt like a ghost case into something real and chilling. And now, as prosecutors in Clark County start dropping fresh court filings packed with new allegations, every old confession suddenly feels like a clue. Each line tugging us deeper into a tangled, dangerous web that's only getting harder to ignore.
You get to be the age that we at and you get to become as successful as we are, you have to start doing some things that matter for the future.
The boldest thread in this entire storm, the one setting off whispers and quiet outrage everywhere, centers on Keefe D himself. Once a known shot caller for the Southside Crips and a name always circling the edges of this case, he's now rumored to have handed the FBI information that ties Snoop Dogg to the setup behind Tupac Shakur's fatal shooting. That claim alone has the streets and the industry losing their minds. Snoop Dogg, a man whose image has always been polished, built on hits, success, and decades of cultural dominance, suddenly finds his name floating in dangerous territory. According to insiders, Keefe D allegedly told federal agents about secret meetups and behind-the-scenes talks that could paint Snoop not as a bystander, but as someone who might have had a stake in the plan to deal with Tupac and Suge Knight. The idea alone is wild. When word of this hit industry circles, jaws dropped. If any of this turns out to hold weight, it's not just another celebrity scandal. It's a full-blown earthquake in hip-hop history. It would completely shift how people view the East Coast-West Coast rivalry, the one that for years was seen as a fight between Diddy, Biggie, Tupac, and the Death Row versus Bad Boy camps. Now, Snoop's name sits right in the crosshairs of new legal attention. And while we stick only to what's verifiable, it's impossible to ignore how fast this story is spreading and how much suspicion it's starting to stir. Back in 2008, Keefe D sat down with Los Angeles police under an immunity deal tied to a PCP ring investigation. And that talk changed everything. His words were later detailed in a book by former detective Greg Kading and covered by LA Weekly. During those interviews, Keefe D openly admitted that he supplied the Glock 40 used in the shooting, and even claimed that if the cars had been switched that night, he would have been the one pulling the trigger. Those old statements, once brushed off as legally meaningless, have now turned into the backbone of a very real and very active case as new filings pile up and his arrest cements the narrative. He also kept repeating one explosive story. that he once met up with Sean Diddy Combs at Greenblatt's Deli to talk about a supposed bounty. Diddy's team has always slammed that story, calling it completely made up and ridiculous. But here's the wild part. That same story has now reappeared in the latest prosecutor filings, this time with even more weight, and according to federal insiders, Keefe D isn't stopping there. He's allegedly giving up new names and spilling on deeper motives that could shake the game all over again. Inside both the music world and the legal scene, this new twist is creating serious unease. Multiple sources close to the situation say that Snoop Dogg has been keeping a close eye on how every new document and leaked detail is being interpreted, watching carefully as the spotlight edges closer to him. Snoop Dogg's camp has come out strong, publicly denying any link to the orchestration of the 1996 Las Vegas shooting. Police have also made it clear that Snoop has never been formally listed as a suspect in Tupac's homicide case. Still, the fact that his name is even floating around in federal discussions now takes this whole situation to a new level of intensity. At the same time, Snoop is juggling his own legal troubles on unrelated federal charges, including 2 convictions tied to transportation for improper conduct, and he's still waiting for sentencing. Industry watchers are pointing out just how dangerous it could get if someone already behind bars, especially someone like Keefe D with deep roots in this saga, starts naming big industry figures in connection with Tupac's killing, a tragedy that's haunted hip-hop and justice circles for almost 30 years.
The reason we asked everyone to be here today is obviously we are the new attorneys for Dwayne Davis in the Tupac case, now set for trial February of next year. The reason in particular that we asked the media to be here is that, obviously we're not trying the case in the media, but we want to establish better relations with the media.
This latest wave of revelations is flipping the whole narrative once again, forcing people to re-examine old rivalries and unsolved questions that never truly went away. For decades, the official story, or the lack of one, left families, fans, and cultural voices piecing together bits of a broken puzzle. The Vegas ambush, just blocks from the Strip after that high-profile boxing match, still echoes in history. The .40 caliber Glock spitting multiple rounds, Tupac suffering critical injuries, and Suge Knight barely escaping. Over time, countless theories have surfaced. Some talking gang revenge, others claiming record label wars, personal beefs, or blind loyalty gone wrong. Now, those same mysteries are being dragged back into the spotlight, louder, messier, and harder to ignore than ever. Now, if federal agents are really tracing those whisper trails that link Snoop Dogg's name to possible financial motives or behind-the-scenes encouragement, then what once lived on the edge of rumor has exploded right into the center of the official maze. Prosecutor insiders say investigators are moving carefully, stressing that every claim needs to be verified and that just being mentioned in someone's interview doesn't mean there's solid proof of guilt. Still, the moment Snoop's name gets tied to this, even loosely, it sends shockwaves through every layer of the culture. But out in the public eye, it doesn't take much. Every rumor, every inside story instantly fuels the narrative. And right in the mix, Suge Knight, the former Death Row Records boss who was in that car with Tupac and survived a grazing wound, keeps adding even more heat from his prison cell. Suge's been talking again, claiming there were way more people involved that night than anyone ever admitted. In recent media conversations, he even hinted that people connected to the case are supposedly trying to secure Keefe D's quiet release because they're scared of what he might expose. That's a wild claim, and while nothing's confirmed, it's only making the tension rise. Whether or not any of that connects back to Snoop's alleged motives is still totally unverified, but it shows just how deep the suspicion now runs. Every whisper, every leaked claim keeps peeling back new layers, reshaping what we thought we knew. The idea that someone once loyal to the code of the streets might now be trading information with the feds is shaking up everything we believed about loyalty, power, and survival. As we start lining up the old timelines against the new secrets leaking from behind closed doors, the question isn't just who knew what, it's what happens next if all these statements made to investigators actually make it into formal evidence. The entire case could shift overnight if those words become official. People close to the review say prosecutors are digging deep, combing through every single thing Keefe D has ever said, from his 2008 confession with LAPD to his explosive claims on Death Row Chronicles, all the way to his street-detailed memoir, Compton Street Legend. Every version he's told adds new color. That meeting at Greenblatt's Deli, the talk about a bounty, the setup plan for Vegas, the gun sliding into the backseat, the chaos at the stoplight, and now even talk of powerful backers with bigger interests than anyone ever realized. The ripple effects are hitting fast. Legal teams on all sides are tightening their game plans, PR reps are crafting damage control statements, and fans across the world are suddenly questioning everything they thought they knew about one of hip-hop's biggest tragedies. Just when it feels like one storyline makes sense, another twist jumps out, throwing the whole picture off again. It's like watching history unravel in real time, messy, unpredictable, and charged with decades of buried tension. This isn't just a rehash of old headlines. It's turning into a live investigation about who really pulled the strings and why. And if Keefe D's cooperation ends up going deeper than anyone expected, we might be staring at one of the biggest reshuffles in music history. Every confession, every quote, every rumor that used to feel like background noise now carries heavy weight under the spotlight of federal scrutiny. Because if even one of those allegations about Snoop Dogg turns out to have any truth, then the entire web of loyalty, betrayal, and rivalry from that era might have to be rewritten right before our eyes. With federal interest still hanging in the air, this next chapter of the saga could explode with new revelations, motives, hidden alliances, and unanswered questions that have gripped music and culture for nearly an entire generation. And this is exactly where everything starts to spiral out of control.
Yeah, I'm waiting, along with a lot of other of Pac's loved ones and fans and supporters. This is like one of the first bits of the answer to what happened to Pac.
Once word spread inside the prison system that Keefe D might be cooperating with federal investigators, those whispers didn't stay locked behind bars. They spread fast. Inmates started talking, saying the old death row empire wasn't just being haunted by the past anymore. It was cracking open from the inside. Then came Suge Knight, still serving time, but talking like he's the last voice of West Coast truth. From his cell, Suge started dropping fresh accusations, the kind that feel like they were meant to blow apart what's left of hip-hop's untouchable legends. According to him, Snoop Dogg, the very man who spent years trying to separate himself from death row's darkest chapters, had allegedly been trying to help bail Keefe D out of custody. That claim hit like a bomb. Because let's be real, why would one of music's biggest powerhouses risk being connected to a man now confessing to one of the industry's most infamous tragedies? It doesn't add up easily. But insiders close to Suge say that he made the claim during a prison interview, alleging that Snoop had people quietly reaching out through intermediaries, asking what Keefe D was really saying to investigators. That single accusation turned old rivalries and grudges into something way more dangerous. Possible motive. And now, the idea that back-channel conversations might be happening between prison walls and Hollywood offices has the whole industry on edge. Nothing about this story feels finished. If anything, it's just starting to unravel louder than ever. It's no secret that Suge Knight and Snoop Dogg's relationship never really healed after that brutal mid-90s fallout. The fights over loyalty, over Tupac, over business, over who really controlled the streets, their split marked one of the deepest rifts in hip-hop history. Snoop's exit from death row came after Tupac's death, and everyone knew it was tense. He walked away from the red and black empire Suge ruled with fear and intimidation, building his own legacy miles away from that chaos. But fast forward to decades later, when Snoop bought back the Death Row brand in 2022, Suge's voice suddenly came roaring back, and his words now sting with something colder than nostalgia. From his cell, Suge has said that Snoop's mad because he owns the label now, and coming from him, that line cuts deep, especially when it's paired with his darker, more explosive claims. It's almost like the man who once made the rules is now trying to expose everyone who broke them, and the shockwaves didn't stop there.
So him being neutral in the beginning was amazing. And then him choosing sides at the end was a demise.
Old associates from the death row days, bodyguards, road managers, studio crew, started reaching out to journalists, hinting that they'd heard pieces of this same story before. One former road manager, speaking anonymously, claimed Suge had been warning people months earlier that someone close to the Dogg father was trying to interfere with the Vegas case before the public ever caught wind. Another insider took it even further, saying Snoop's camp had allegedly reached out to Keefe D's family through mutual contacts, maybe just to find out how far his cooperation with the feds had really gone. If true, that's a wild twist, one that throws a whole new light on how deep this story might actually run. None of this has been officially confirmed, but it's easy to see how every new claim is pouring gasoline on the fire. Old rivalries are being dug up, familiar grudges are getting reborn, and even long silences now feel suspicious. The entire story is feeding a storm that just won't die down. And beneath all that noise, one thing stands out. Suge Knight's new statements have revived an old, chilling theory the world thought it had buried years ago. The idea that Snoop Dogg's clean, friendly image might be hiding a darker history with Tupac Shakur than anyone ever wanted to believe. That single idea alone has shaken fans who grew up idolizing both men. Suge has never backed down from his version of events. He's always claimed that Tupac and Snoop were not on good terms in those final days. According to him, Tupac felt betrayed after hearing Snoop speak kindly about Biggie and Diddy on a radio show just weeks before Vegas. Shakur felt betrayed, Suge said in an earlier interview, adding that Tupac was furious someone he loved like a brother could show softness toward the enemy. Suge even claimed that a fight nearly broke out between the two in a New York hotel room, and that only security stepping in stopped it from turning ugly.
I have never seen, until Kendrick now, I'd never seen anybody from where I'm from, the area I'm from, the place I'm from, do what Snoop did.
If that rift was real, it changes everything we thought we knew about those last moments. The tense studio sessions, the quiet car rides, even those awkward smiles caught in final photos. It all takes on a new meaning now, making the tragedy that followed feel even heavier and more complicated than anyone imagined. Within just a few months, Tupac Shakur was gone, and everything started to fall apart. Snoop Dogg walked away from death row, and the empire Suge Knight had built on power and intimidation began to crumble under the weight of indictments, fear, and betrayal. Fast forward to now. Keefe D is sitting behind bars, talking to federal agents, while Snoop now controls the same label he once ran from. It all feels eerily full circle, like the ghosts of the past have come back demanding answers no one's ready to give. So when Suge throws out accusations that Snoop's trying to get Keefe D released, it's not just a wild headline. It sounds like a loaded threat wrapped in layers of hidden meaning. Because if Keefe D is spilling names linked to money, power, or orders, and even one of those names points towards someone still sitting high in the game, that could trigger an industry quake bigger than anything since the East Coast versus West Coast wars blew up in the 90s. We've seen how this kind of thing unfolds before. First comes the denial, then the sudden memory gaps, and finally, the quiet moves behind the scenes as people start protecting their reputations. Now, inside Las Vegas law enforcement circles, sources say investigators are still combing through hours of Keefe D's recorded interviews, and some of those tapes reportedly contain things the public has never heard before. Whatever's hiding in those recordings could be the next bombshell, and everyone knows it. Whether Snoop Dogg's name shows up in any of those sealed recordings is still a mystery, but the timing of Suge Knight's latest outburst feels way too deliberate to ignore. It came right after prosecutors pushed Keefe D's trial back to early 2026, and that delay gives plenty of time for people to rewrite history, to twist stories, settle old scores, and bury the truth so deep that lies start to sound real. The longer the clock ticks, the messier the game gets. And then, of course, comes the money, the heart of every major move in this saga. Keefe D once claimed there was $1 million bounty tied to the hit, supposedly offered by Sean Diddy Combs back in the day. But now, Suge's new interviews have flipped that claim upside down, hinting that other heavyweights on the West Coast may have also been involved, maybe funding or even green-lighting retaliation.
It's so complicated, convoluted, chaotic. It's hard to actually figure out what's what, but it's becoming clearer.
Could it be that the Diddy angle was only one side of the puzzle? Some veteran producers from that era have been quietly telling reporters that they believe multiple players had cash on the table. Not just New York money, but Los Angeles money too. It wasn't just an East Coast beef. One source said recently, it was internal, it was business. That single quote changes everything, turning what we thought was a coast-to-coast rivalry into something that may have been homegrown chaos all along. And if even part of that is true, then Snoop's 2022 purchase of the Death Row label might not just be about honoring history. It could look more like a calculated move to control the narrative before someone else controlled him. Meanwhile, the fan base is completely split. Some say Suge is just talking wild from his cell, a man with nothing left to lose. But others, they're convinced he's dropping cryptic hints and that the real story still hasn't even started to unfold. As court transcripts inch closer to the surface, Snoop Dogg keeps moving like nothing can touch him, dropping new music, showing up on TV, and keeping that same calm, collected energy even as the headlines get darker and louder. His only real public reaction so far was a slick online jab. This man won't stop talking about me. Mad 'cause I own Death Row. I realize your lies. Classic Snoop. Cool, dismissive, and perfectly timed to shut it down without actually saying much at all. But behind that easy confidence, there's a growing curiosity that people can't ignore. If the accusations are really nonsense, why even acknowledge them? Why not just let them fade? That question keeps circling back as this web of confessions, rivalries, and half-truths keeps stretching wider by the day. And just when it feels like the noise is settling,
I say a week before we was best of friends. 2 days before he died, I don't think he liked me.
something new leaks out. A name tucked in a transcript, a cryptic note about sealed evidence, a whisper about new witnesses ready to talk. Sources say prosecutors might expand the case if Keefe D keeps naming names, and that possibility has the entire industry on edge. Everyone's watching closely, waiting to see who gets pulled into the next chapter of this decades-long storm. The idea of federal agents dragging these 30-year-old grudges and alliances into a modern courtroom is almost surreal, like history refusing to stay buried. At this point, it's not even about who pulled the trigger in that white Cadillac anymore. It's about who gave the order, who cashed in on the chaos, and who's been hiding behind loyalty slogans and silence for nearly 3 decades. The walls between myth and truth are getting thinner every day, and everyone in the game feels the pressure tightening. As alliances keep flipping faster than anyone can track, from Diddy wrestling with his own legal chaos to Suge Knight hinting at revenge through the power of what he knows, it's hard to shake the feeling that something huge is about to break. It feels like we're standing right on the edge of hip-hop's biggest unmasking, the moment when its darkest secret finally steps out of the shadows for good. And this time, no one's gonna be able to brush it off as just old street talk. The question's getting louder now. If Keefe D keeps talking, who's next to fall? Could Snoop Dogg's empire, the same one built on redemption, legacy, and nostalgia, end up being the next casualty of truth catching up after all these years? Or will he walk away untouched again, the legend who somehow survives every storm? Whatever happens next, one thing's for sure. This story is far from over. The next headline could flip everything we thought we knew about that night in Vegas, about loyalty, betrayal, and the real forces that shaped an entire era of music and power. Are we finally watching the real story unfold before our eyes? Or is this just another round of revenge fueled by rumor and desperation? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what you think. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because trust this, the streets are talking louder than ever, and the next truth bomb might drop any second.